Coming up on this episode of BRM TV, weathering techniques using the Humbrol range, and I build some kits from the Narrow Gauge Society and visit Bressingham Steam Museum and Gardens. But first, let's take a look at our layout of the month, Oakley Green.
I like industrial grime. I've grown up with it. I'm originally a northerner, so I've grown up around the collieries and factories all my life, and having worked in a factory for a long time as well, you get used to seeing industrial buildings, and I think it's the age we're in now. You know, everything's sort of an urban sprawl of buildings and, you know, derelict buildings. My favourite building on this layout has to be the derelict mill, because it's not something you see often on layouts. Everything's sort of pristine and nice and clean, and I like the derelict mill because it's got, you know, the holes in the roof, the single slates, you know, holes in the windows. And it does look like something you see around, you know, the Birmingham, North East, you know, northern areas, Manchester, places like that. So the layout represents a mid-northern little small station with a small fuel point and quite a lot of industrial look, with quite a lot of embankments and sort of an intercity urban area, mainly fictitious, based on a lot of things I've seen over the years. My name's Neil Mason and welcome to my layout, Starson Park. This layout, Starson probably took us around 4 months altogether. It's a joint venture between myself and James Stiles, who basically did all the scratch buildings for us. He's part of our business, you sort of commission him to build buildings for us as well. We can operate from front or back. The control panel with the LEDs on for changing the points has a blanking plate, so we can take the control panel off and reverse it so it can be operated from the rear very easily. And we put the blanking plate on the front so we can do shows from the front or the back. The DCC system is just a standard Gauge Master Prodigy system, an express starter set. We basically use the Cobalt Alpha system, which is an analog DCC concept system using 4 Cobalt Alphas wired through with the polarity switches through the actual motors that run them, which run into a small control panel with illuminated LED system, which is a push button system. This system is fantastic because it means we don't have to solder anything. So for all our customers and the end users, they don't have to solder anything. We can diagnose it very quickly, and it's very simple to maintain and replace parts if needed. We use 2-car 101 or 108 DMUs, 128 parcel units in Royal Mail or Blue livery. That's pretty much the parcel stock. We do have a BG with the Royal Mail parcels 128, which we shunt out with an 08 and then run round with the 128. The freight stock, we run pretty much a lot of light locos into the fuel point, which gives it quite a lot of varied action with different types of locos, different types of stock. Most of the stock is from the 90s to early 2000s, sort of your 3-tone petroleum sector locos, Dutch livery locos and rail freight locos.
Now, there are many wagon kits on the market available for modellers to buy, but some are exclusive to those of a particular association, and the 2 wagon kits that I'm going to build today are exclusive to the N Gauge Society. These 2 are available, but the cheapest of which in its entire range is available for just £5. They call it the wagon for a fiver, and it's essentially a great way to get involved into wagon building. It's a very, very easy kit to build. So let's start off with that one. It's a basic private owner wagon, you can see, is supplied with a Pico chassis, a 3D printed top, and a little cast interior moulding there if you want to represent the wagon as filled. And just to make things really easy, the sides are pre-printed as two little decals that you can apply to the sides of the wagon, and then just paint the ends, making it a lot easier than applying the wording and lettering separately. So let's open up the chassis, because that's where we're going to start with this kit. We'll assemble that. So how does Pico's wagon chassis work? Well, it's very easy. You've got these two little couplings which are adjustable in height there, and ordinarily you'd use these little plastic tabs to hold them into place with a little bit of glue, but if not, most of the time they are held in place with a push fit. However, the N-Gage Society have supplied us with this top, which has two little guiding lugs and two tabs which hold the couplings into place. Now, before we put the top on, there's this little metal weight, because most N-Gage wagons are very light and they are prone to derailment if you're not careful or your track is a little bit uneven. So we'll put those into place, push the body on top, and it should clip into place. Nearly there. No. Might need to just push this metal weight a little bit in with the back of the scalpel. There we go, and there we are. So, wagon body on wagon chassis. All that remains to be done now is fit the wheels. Now, the wheels supplied with the chassis are plastic. These are quite fine for running around on your layout, but you might prefer to replace these with a metal alternative, in which case this is the best time to do it. But fitting the wheels is really easy. It's just one side in. They don't actually run in bearings, these, so again, if you want to retrofit bearings, it's a good time as well to do that. And just pull the other side of the wagon chassis apart, and these should slide in perfectly. Just give them a quick test with your finger, and if they're free running, that's fine. You don't need to do any more. Same on the other side. And hey presto, there we go. Now, the load included is cast, you can see there, in what appears to be plaster. But inside the wagon are these little retaining lugs. Now, you might wish to remove these if you want to model the wagon as not having a load, but in our case we're just going to pop that in there, and it adds some extra weight to the wagon. And as for the sides, well, these are already printed. Simply just pop them on the sides of your wagon, paint the ends, and hey presto, you've got a wagon ready for your layout for just £5. Very good, very versatile kit. But that's the beginner's kit. We're going to look now at a more advanced kit, which requires a few more stages to put together, but makes a very attractive alternative nonetheless. It's kit 51. Now, as the number denotes, you can see there are quite a few kits available from the Society, but this one covers a batch of wagons, specifically the Ling, Tunny and Rudd, and also Grampus wagons. Essentially, originally a Great Western Railway design, but these were modernised right up in use to sort of mid-90s in the latter scenario of the Rudd build. So, inside the kit we get a selection of comprehensive instructions. All parts are labelled, and you even get a sheet which shows you where to put transfers on your wagon with each era covered. There we go, very comprehensive, nice little kit to put together. Inside, all parts are injection moulded plastic, so we've got the original sides there now for the Grampus. We've got the two different ends depending on which wagon you're building. So we're going to build the slightly later version, the Rudd, and it's going to sit on this chassis, which is from Pico. It's the Parkside wagon chassis. So everything's included really with this chassis pack. It's a 12-foot wheelbase chassis, and you get your wheels inside there with some buffers. So let's start with the chassis, because that's probably what we're going to concentrate on the most. It's the most important part to get right, because without a proper chassis it's not going to run properly. The chassis comes with its own instructions, and we're going to use some glue to assemble the kit together, which we didn't really need to use for the other one, but we could have done to keep parts together if we wanted. This is from Mr. Hobby. It's the Mr. Cement Deluxe glue. Essentially a plastic model glue, solvent adhesive, very, very good to use. I've always got on with this very well. And there's also a limonene type, which actually smells of lemons if you so wish. So let's get started on the kit. So I'm just using a scalpel, and you can see all parts are held into place on the sprue. Because this is an N-Gage wagon, some of the of the little bars and things like that are very, very fragile. So do be careful that you don't cut through them, because once these are cut through and they're broken, no matter how many times you try and glue them back together, they're always going to be a weak point in a chassis. So with all of the parts cut out, I'm just going to tidy them up now with a selection of sanding sticks, which are very versatile and easy to use. And I find that these don't dig in as much with softer plastics, especially the injection molded ones, when you're trying to rub down larger surfaces. Needle files are great for getting into little corners and things, but if you want to make sure that you've got an even flush surface and you're pushed on time, these are great alternatives. Okay, so all the parts are now cut out, everything's sanded and flush, and we've done a quick dry run to make sure that everything fits. Now a dry run is essentially you line up the parts, make sure that there's no flash and everything fits correctly before you apply the glue. Now the important bit to remember with these wagon chassis is that the brake handle and the brake rigging, which is essentially everything that controls the brake from the handle all the way through the mechanism to the application on the wheels, is handed, and that means that it's different on one side from the other, and you can easily get them on the wrong side. So it's important to refer to the instruction book to make sure that everything fits as it should do, because otherwise once it's glued it's a mess to have to rectify. So looking at the instructions here, this part fits on the back of here, and it's very easy to fit because we've got these little alignment lugs sticking out here and two holes on the other side there. So it's essentially just a case of dabbing them one side with some glue. Just get any excess off the brush there. I'm just going to put a slither of glue on one side of the wagon there, and then offer the other side up, and it should be completely flush. That's how we're going to know that it's correctly located. Let's push it into place there, and we'll leave that one to one side whilst we crack on with the other side. And same procedure again. And essentially this is all that you need to do really with the entire chassis. Again, for the sole bars, they're easily located with the little slots in the ends. So join me after this where we'll put the top of the wagon together. So with the chassis now gluing into place, all we need to do now is just fit these little couplings, and these are essentially 3 parts which you need to fit together. There's no glue required at all on these, which is just as well, because we want to make sure that they're all free running. So there's a little slot there into which we've tidied up with a little scalpel, fit the coupling into place, and then there's just this little retainer which fits over the top and is pushed down firmly into place. And if you can't quite get it in, sometimes a pair of tweezers is helpful. There we are, and into place like so. And just check it for height so that if it's held horizontally, the coupling should be level. So if you've got it pointing up slightly, it's probably because you've pushed the top piece in too far. And with those two done, we'll put them to one side and crack on with the top of the wagon. Just using a scalpel, we'll just work our way around the tabs. So let's now tidy up the base and glue that into place, and that's what's going to keep the sides on our wagon nice and flush. Now I'm not exactly following the instructions word for word, because they do recommend fitting one side of the chassis, putting the wheel sets into place and then attaching the other side. But since this glue isn't instant drying, and we should be fine. So applying the glue sparingly here because we want to make sure we get an even bond all the way around the outside. And pop it onto the base. We want to make sure that it's square and even all the way around as well. So we don't want more of an overhang on one side than the other. At the same time, this is what's going to make sure that the chassis is square and rigid and that it'll run smoothly on the track. So just checking that over, I think we're pretty much aligned there. There's no air or gaps underneath it, so we'll leave that to one side to dry whilst we glue the ends and sides of our wagon together. Okay, so I'm just fitting now these little brass buffers into the holes on the wagon. And these are a push fit. There's no need to apply any super glue with these. They are actually quite tight, but I find the easiest way to do it is just to apply it from above like that and then push down on the back of the wagon with, say, the back of a file or maybe even the front of it, just lining them up there. And in they go. Just make sure that they're all pointing the right way. And yeah, essentially continue all the way around the wagon. We've now got the chassis onto the body, that went on perfectly. The only thing I noticed was that the ends here have got the buffer housings already moulded into place, and of course I'd gone and attached these to the chassis, which of course made the body ride too high. So luckily though, the glue hadn't dried, so they could be replaced really easily. So all that remains to be done now is just to glue the coupling into place. For that I'm just going to use a little spot of plastic adhesive on there, apply it firmly onto the underside of the wagon, like so. There we go, a great kit to put together, very versatile, and of course with the 3 different varieties you can make from the same kit, it's a great addition no matter what era you model. So if you'd like to get hold of any of the Engage Society's kits, including the basic £5 wagon kit, visit its website, become a member and enjoy the benefits of membership, such as the regular updates, newsletters and the little magazine that they send out to all members. For all details on the Engage Society, visit the link below and take a look.
One of the most useful techniques that you can have as a modeller wanting to weather his rolling stock is the skill of dry brushing. Now, dry brushing is one of those techniques that it's difficult to explain on the page, but fortunately it's really quite easy for us to show you how it works. And I have a willing assistant here, Andy, who's never done anything quite like this before, so I'm going to teach you how to dry brush and weather wagons.
I'm slightly nervous about this. I do have some art training, but I've never dry brushed apart from trying to do something with my children's Warhammer figures, and with mixed results, I got to say.
Well,
so Phil, I'm quite keen to get going on this. So, is this what we'll be doing today?
Yes, we are, but not yet. Now, I've done a lot of dry brushing in the past. In fact, for my first serious layout, Melbridge Dock, all the wagons were dry brush weathered, so it's the only technique I used at the time. However, don't pile into your wagons. What we're going to start with is a bit of brick plasticard, practicing our dry brushing. Now, this might seem like an odd thing to do, but this is also a technique that's very, very useful for model making generally. This is a Pico Engage signal box kit, and all the brickwork you can see here, all the brickwork has been dry brushed. So I very carefully painted a watercolour on and then dry brushed the brick colour on top of that. And as you can see, the bricks actually stand out, even though it's a fiddly little scale building.
I'm feeling the pressure.
You're feeling the pressure. Don't worry, I've got you some nice, simple 00 gauge brick plasticard from Southeastern Finecast, in case somebody's wondering where this came from. Tools required are really simple. You need a brush. These are some of the tatty brushes from my brush pot. You don't want to be using good brushes for dry brushing because it isn't going to do them any favours. And the technique, let's quickly run through a technique. You pick up a bit of paint, we'll wipe the worst of the paint off the brush on a cloth, and then we'll work the brush over the surface. It's called dry brushing because actually you're applying very nearly dry paint on here, and it's being dragged off the bristles by rubbing it over the surface, which is why it does the bristles no good at all. But if you've got old brushes sitting around the workbench, it's a perfect use for them before they end up in the bin.
Do we need to use a particularly stiff brush for this?
I find any brush seems to work. I mean, I've got a bit of a mixed bag here. Most of them are Humbrol, except I've got one sable brush here. The softer ones I find are good for working around wagons and round detail. The harder ones are slightly better for buildings and this sort of thing. But to be honest, as long as you work gently, it doesn't really matter too much.
Okay.
Okay, right. What I've got is, let's start with some blacks. It'll sharp well for the camera. Using some Humbrol acrylic, because we're working in a studio and health and safety doesn't smell. So nobody's going to come to any harm with this. You can work with any sort of paint, if I'm honest, for dry brushing. And all I do is, if I quickly demonstrate, pick up some paint, work the worst of it off on the cloth, and then just work it backwards and forwards on the bricks, and you can see fairly gently, you can see the bricks starting to appear on the sheet. Okay, now the trick is to use hardly any paint and work the thing backwards and forwards to gradually build up the effect. Okay, simple.
So it's dry brushing.
Dry brushing, off you go, Andy. So pick up a little bit of paint,
Okay.
wipe some off on the cloth, and now if you have a go at the plastic card.
Okay. Oh, hang on, I'm a bit thick here.
Now, what's happened is you can see that if I show this to the camera briefly, what's happened here is classic beginner's mistake with dry brushing, too much paint on the brush and it's gone down and you're losing all the detail. But actually you can see the effect starting to appear here where once you've taken off some more of the paint, the dry brushing is working properly. So rub a bit more off on the cloth.
Well, question here though, I mean, it's a beginner's mistake. If you've made this mistake as a beginner, can you wipe this paint off and start again?
Yeah, well, normally what I'd do is I'd take whatever thinners it requires on a cloth and just wipe it over fairly quickly. In this case, water would actually lift this stuff quite nicely.
Right, okay, so I think I've taken more or less all the paint off this.
You actually really want to take almost all the paint off, and look at that.
Is that better?
That is pretty much perfect.
I feel like I'm just tickling it.
You are. It does. It's a really weird feeling. You're not pushing into it at all. You are tickling the surface very, very gently,
Yeah.
and you can see the effect. All the bricks are really starting to come out.
And could I smooth that out?
Don't need to. Leave it alone. It'll settle. It'll dry. I mean, it is almost dry. It is almost dry on here. And then when you need to pick up a bit more, just pick up. I'd be honest. You could probably pick some up from the cloth actually.
Let's have a go.
I have a little area on the corner of my modelling board where I've gradually built up a lump of paint because I've worked brushes out over on the corner. But that is essentially
Oh,
dry
put too
brushing.
much on again.
Yes, the key is always go for less paint on the brush than more because you can always keep working over the same area to build the effect up. And
I got cocky,
you got cocky.
but I can see the effect.
But you can see effect, and in a few seconds you can see that you've built up the bricks appearing on there. I mean, we're working black on white here, so it really is starting.
It's
really
really
going to sharp all the issues. But I think you're getting the hang of this stuff now.
I wouldn't quite say that, but I'm ready for the next challenge.
You're ready for the next challenge, right? Well, having done this, and I say it is worth practicing. It is useful for buildings, but it is a technique worth practicing, and bits of plastic art are perfect for the job.
Mm-hmm.
The next stage is what we'll do, and I'm going to be very bad here. I'm not actually even going to wash the brushes out because we're now going to take some rust colour paint and just work over the underframes of the wagons. Now, I don't tend to worry too much when I'm weathering about cleaning the brush between jobs. One of the things is you actually do want a very dry, you want to start with a very dry brush on this, and that means when you wash it, you're probably going to have to leave it sitting around too dry before you can work on the next colour. However, in real life, colours all meld. Your card doesn't get dirty in specific areas.
Mine does.
Yes, but it gets everywhere. And then the colours meld, so all I'm going to do is just, that's a little bit heavy there. All I'm doing is just, again, tickling the surface, and you can see that all the raised areas are now getting a little bit of coat of rust. And I'm doing I'll do the rivets on the end, and the rivets on the end there, just doing something over all the metalwork. And the paint will be dragged off the bristles of the brush by any of the raised areas. And this bright red wagon, which never looks quite right on the layout, is already just starting to take on a bit of a nice dirty appearance. It's toning down the whites and that sort of thing. Okay, the great thing about dry brushing is it's a very, very subtle effect. You just keep working at it until you're happy.
And would you dry brush over the printing as well?
Yep, I'm happy to dry brush over absolutely everything. Dirt gets everywhere,
yeah.
So does my paint. I tend to emphasise the metal bits get more rust colour. The printing, certainly on a coal wagon, for example, would actually get a lot more black in it. And I'd work on all the colours one after another. And don't let them dry properly. Just crack on and do that because it lets the paint then mix on the wagon and gives you that nice unified effect. So. Have a crack at the underframe on this one. Now it should show up quite nicely because it's a black wagon.
Yeah. I noticed you gave me the one that's going to show the mistakes the most.
Yes, that's it. That's plenty of paint. Just get it on the cloth.
I think I've taken quite a lot off there.
Yeah, that's it. You do want to take quite a lot off. You can always you keep working over the model until, and just that's it. You can see, look, the edge is already picking up a little bit of rust. It's taking that pure black of the original model and just toning it down a little bit, giving it a bit of life. As you can see, just tickle the wagons, tickle them, tickle all the black metal bits.
So here as well?
Here as well, yeah, because rust spreads everywhere. And always try and, I mean, on the sides too, do try and work downwards, because because rain washes dirt downwards rather than wash it horizontally generally. And I know you're going to say you've been out walking when the rain's been horizontal, but for model railways we assume rain is usually vertical, and they are. I mean, that's pretty much job done on that wagon. It's just toned down the black underframe a little bit for very little effort.
Okay, I feel I need to practice, but I can understand the technique.
It is a case practice. Just work the colours in. Do start on an old wagon or something that you're not really too worried about. But as you can see, very, very useful technique. The more with a bit of practice, you'll be finding you're using it everywhere. Right, we'll leave Andy to his weathering then, and hope you'll all go away and be dry brushing happily ever after.
Thanks, Bill.
The first bank holiday in May was Bressingham Steam Museum and Gardens Heritage Steam Gala, and a great day out to be had, so I was keen to explore some of the attractions. On site, it's a real railway fanatic's dream come true, with a standard gauge, 2-foot gauge, 10¼ inch gauge and model railways all on show. Well, the weather's definitely out, it's a brilliant day for it, and you join me, first of all, inside the cab of Hunslet Austerity number 3193. And I'm here with David, who is part of the
Norfolk Heritage Steam Railway Limited.
Right. So you're essentially one of the custodians of this association that was formed to preserve and restore this locomotive.
A group of us, mostly elderly retired people, formed a little company in 2009.
Okay.
Specifically to buy this locomotive. We bought it from the Lavender line in Sussex, and it came to us in bits.
Right.
It took 4 lorries to get it to us.
Now, when you say in bits, it's not necessarily always like a kit, but how much?
It felt like a kit.
It felt like a kit.
Yes,
I mean,
did.
are we talking sort of bare bones shell?
No, the chassis was complete with the motion and the wheels. The tank was sitting on top of the chassis, but there was no boiler, no chimney, no dome. The bunker was incredibly rusty, so we had to pull it off and have a new one made. We had to make a new smoke box, which was done by a local firm in Norfolk.
So there's been quite a lot of time invested in the project already.
Oh yes.
It sounds brilliant. It's a great project. So if anybody watching this would like to get involved with your association,
Yes.
do you have a website?
We have a website. It's www.norfolksteamloco, all one word, .co.uk.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for your time, David.
It's a pleasure.
Enjoy the day, and we'll see what else we can find out here. Around the grounds at Bressingham is a 2-foot gauge line approximately 1.6 miles in length. I met up with Jeff Carver, long-standing driver on the line, for a cab ride, which proved quite interesting, and this being a special gala, there was a fantastic array of locomotives operating the line, including some double heading. Listening for the walkie-talkie over the notoriously violent safety valves kept us on our toes. If there was one thing to be said for the weather though, it was that it was hot, very hot. Great for visitors, but on a footplate we were cooking quite nicely, so it was nice to cool down for a bit, and we headed inside to the exhibition and museum area. The exhibition is home to a collection of vehicles that featured in the infamous 1970s BBC television series Dad's Army, with vehicles such as the Guildford Motor Company bus from the episode Everyone's Trucking, a refuse lorry and fire engine. It's well worth a visit for fans of the series. There's also a fantastic collection of narrow gauge locomotives on show and a static travelling post office coach. On the day above the museum sat a 00 gauge model railway and 16mm narrow gauge layout, so I met with Keith from the 16mm Narrow Gauge Society for a quick chat.
What we've got here is a layout which was built by and is owned by local members of the 16mm Association. the museum here very kindly give us this space.
Yeah.
And so from their point of view, it's an added attraction. From our point of view, it's somewhere we can show off our hobby.
But I believe you've got a larger event coming up in June.
There are two large events coming up. The first is in June, Narrow Gauge East. There are narrow gauge events in other parts of the country, but this is the first time there's going to be a Narrow Gauge East. And then in August we have our Garden Railway Show.
If you're ever around in the area and you'd like to take a look at the fantastic layout of the 16mm gauge association modelers here, take a look, say hello to Keith and his friends, and I'm sure you'll feel very welcome. Bressingham Steam Museum and Gardens makes for a great family-friendly day out in Norfolk, so if ever you're in the area, I highly recommend it. I hope you found the tips on this month's DVD useful, and until next month, enjoy your modelling.